unified system on the issues people care about, so.
Kim Wass, WAAS.
WASS, and I can actually find that now, and if it sounds good, with the
Yeah,
co-chair's
well, I
approval,
sort of
I'll
see that.
reply and say, yes, go ahead, and, we'll invite them, but once we have a date.
Did you have a third person you mentioned, Jeff?
Well, Jim McGovern, the congressman who was, got deep experience on all sides of this issue, including sponsoring 2 or 3 of the different amendments, believing that we should have a debate about it.
And we're not meeting on Yom Kippur.
Well, that's, the October 9th meeting was canceled.
I tried to speak up at the meeting when that was, and I guess I didn't yell.
We didn't hear you.
I didn't yell loud enough,
So it's just been,
Yeah.
he's chair of the rules committee, and, he's swamped, so it's been hard to reschedule that, so that we might, I don't know, maybe we could have him appear by telephone or something as an invited guest, but I think he was interested in having a more public meeting and hearing from other people too, so that was the original Worcester idea that we didn't do.
Well, if there are other ideas for suggestions for expert witness types, you could share those with Bill and me, and then we could vet them with the group as a whole, or at least try to organize them in some way to think about who we want to reach out
You
to.
had recommended a professor at,
Well, there's several, Ray LaRaja.
Ray LaRaja is the one,
There's
right?
Michael Malvin from the
Yeah,
Kennedy.
do you want to invite some of them?
Sure, I'd be glad to. They're more in line with your money and politics working group, so if those are good names you think you want to support.
I don't know their work, except my sense is that they're probably less enthusiastic about what we're doing.
Well, no,
so-
I think they'd be supportive, and at least in one case, in Michael Malvin's case, he was very excited about what we're doing here. He runs the Campaign Finance Institute, that's not part of the National Institute
Oh,
of
yeah.
Finance, they called it.
Is
So
he
I
local?
think he's in Washington. Actually, he's in New York now, so he could make a trip up here, but he can also do it by, Skype or
Yeah.
some type of video conferencing, so.
If you know them, I think it would probably be
Yeah, sure.
helpful both
Sure.
as chair and as a colleague in the
Yeah.
academia.
Sure.
If they heard it from you, they might be more responsive.
Yeah,
So-
I'll reach out. But there are, I don't know if there are others, it could be,
Yeah.
maybe the Harvard Business School, was part of this study, or, folks like that, Larry Ellison types.
If business has come up a few times, and if we can do it by telephone, Elizabeth Doty, and full disclosure, runs Business for American Promise, my organization. She's organizing, Cheryl knows her, so, business support for the amendment, and she's, Harvard Business School, she's going to go out and talk to Mal Salter about it. So she is deep experience and connected to some of the conversations happening in corporations, some of the biggest corporations in the world about this issue. So she'd actually be,
I think that's
if we could do it by
it's an
telephone.
important point of view to have. I mean,
Yeah.
there was that, New York Times ad with all those businesses.
Yeah, the business roundtable statement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're,
And she has an
they
op-ed
don't want
about
all
that
this
piece,
stuff.
exactly.
You know.
She'd show that, to Greg's point, that we could actually, if there are people we might assume are against this, but if we actually engage them and get their point of view, there's common ground in some areas, so we should know about that.
Could I just ask a question then about your schedule? This is listening in the background. So if you have to have a report or a preliminary reporting by the end of December.
Yeah.
So do you anticipate that the report will say, here's what we've learned, we believe an amendment is important, now we're going to take the next 2 months and write the amendment? Or does the report actually have to have the amendment? So the report has to have the amendment, you need to schedule some meetings in here to actually figure out what the amendment looks like. Or can you actually push it into, January, February? I'm just trying to think about the
I have a view
schedule.
on that. Do you want to talk about it?
Let's talk about it. I have a view on that as well.
After you, Mr. Chair.
I would be of the opinion that this commission should continue beyond December 31st. Our work will not be done. Yeah, that we should get a budget in this cycle of the budget process for more support from state government to continue the work of the commission beyond December 31st. So I would think of December 31st as a stopping point on a longer journey.
Do you need an amendment, because that was passed in the ballot? that we have this commission in the time frame?
No, it said the first report was due in December.
Yeah, so it's the
Hey,
first
report-
report, it didn't say the last report.
Doesn't say last.
Yeah.
It's open-ended.
It didn't have an end date.
I would say it's.
Basically, I think the end date is when we ratify the
Figure out
amendment.
what's going on here.
Or we get exhausted, whichever comes first.
So I expressed an opinion, Jeff, you said you had an opinion. on
Well, I
this.
share the opinion that was expressed, that we're not gonna be done. I think we would need an amended law to get resources, because the voters were assured they're gonna take tax dollars, so I think we need you to take the heat. But I think regardless of whether we get resources, I think we should issue a first report, which reports on what we have learned, what we've done, and what's left to do. And then say we anticipate continuing to take testimony and issuing a second report that will cover X, Y, and Z, and set ourselves a deadline on that, and be careful to not say last report on even the second one, because I think this is an ongoing process that we're gonna be, and nobody can fault us for being in it for the big bucks and trying to make it last longer, because it's, we know this is sort of the thankless task, but I think to make any of this work worthwhile, we have to really be serious that we're not gonna be finished by December 31st. But we've gathered a lot of stuff, and if we organize it and report it out, I think it'll get more public interest. And there's some interesting facts to report, and there's some.
So my view is slightly different. I don't disagree that we will not be done, that we will be done. I don't think we will be done, that clear. However, I do think there is some expectation that we will have language for an amendment proposed by December 31st. I think that's what we've been working toward, and that's what we have been anticipating we're gonna need to do. So it might not be easy, but I think if we have this indefinite deadline for actually crafting the language of an amendment, that will lose people's interest, we'll lose any momentum we had, and then we'll also just not force ourselves to do it, right, if we have this indefinite deadline. Now, maybe that is an amendment that is itself amendable, right? Maybe it's a proposed language for an amendment.
Oh,
But I think
absolutely.
we need to have something that resembles something that could look like an amendment, not.
I agree with
that, you know.
Yeah.
I think
but-
some kind of hybrid between the two.
Yeah.
But, you know, this is our draft that we're.
This is it, maybe we
right now.
solicit additional public commentary on it, or more witnesses after
Yeah.
the fact, or whatever. But we need something that we as a group have come up, have some consensus around. We feel comfortable that this is what it could look like. And maybe that's as simple as, resembling other language passed in other states, for example. That might make sense to.
And there are several amendment proposals.
There are models of it, and it would make sense to follow those pretty closely, because in the end, if this does happen, it's gonna require, some support behind the single initiative, right?
Yeah.
So,
And what do you guys
I
think
think
about?
there's a hybrid there, but that's not opposed.
I think it's very useful to have,
Yeah, I don't think we should.
more than a straw man, but less than a
Mhm.
finished product.
Yeah.
What do you think about the notion of asking for an appropriation for administrative support from the state to?
What's the
help-
temperature?
All they can do is say no,
Legislature.
all they can do is say no.
We should
I mean,
definitely try.
I talked to
You
this-
need it.
I talked to one of the
Don't
leaders,
ask,
one of the
see.
chambers
Definitely
about
won't
it.
get
And,
Definitely.
I'll make it a point to talk to the other one.
Right.
But we should think of a dollar amount that we.
So, just a little bit more on this matter, so if we want it to be considered for inclusion in the budget that the governor will file in January, okay?
Oh, hold it.
Time is.
Why not a supplemental budget? We'll get money faster in a supplemental.
Or a
budget.
supplemental budget, okay? And we'd probably write the language, I could write the language in my head, notwithstanding Commissioner Jones' special law of the contract, chapter 332.
He's done this
By
before.
further amended
His old
by
hat.
sitting out this
Yeah.
percent, and furthermore, the sum of, $100,000.
Bill's gonna have us millions of dollars in a building
Go
before
for
we're
it. No,
done.
that's right.
A staff of 30.
Right, so
and-
it's for many, many
Well,
years.
personal assistance.
We gotta see the Massachusetts Citizen Commission on the building.
Assuming that we wanted administrative
Citizens
support
Commission.
from the enactment through calendar year 2020. So we're talking about a year or so.
At least.
And this would, give us meeting space with, full support for the website, all of the administrative issues that we've been frustrated with
Yeah.
for these past many months.
Yeah.
Okay? And a budget, and I'd write it up in such a way that it could be deployed in various mechanisms. For example, it could be just allowing existing state entity to increase their budget, to therefore increase their support to us. Or it could be crafted there's a variety of ways that,
Okay.
but I would think along the lines of $100,000, okay?
Very
It's in the
reasonable.
Commonwealth's interest,
Very reasonable.
So that'd be full-time staff, pretty much.
depending on how we craft it, okay? And so we'll talk some more about this if the idea it sounds like it has merit, okay? So I'll actually put something together that we can react to. I think an easy way to do this is just to take the budget for the governor's commission, the governor's organization that does the commissions,
Boards and
George
commissions,
didn't know where,
yeah.
and so just increase their budget by $100,000, okay? And assign them this mission with some fair degree of specificity. So we're not like hunting for a sponsor, they're named, okay? And they don't have, I don't have any budget, it's like, you do have a budget, okay? And so that sort of pins the tail on talking. That would be something along those lines would be my recommendation.
So will this go through the legislative process,
Yeah.
the Ways and Means?
Then it has to go to the House and Senate and conference and enact it.
And Carmen can get the speaker on board, and you can get the governor on board, and somebody talks to the Senate president, I think it
I
would.
can talk to Karen.
I already spoke to her. But I just started the conversation.
Yeah.
So this would tend to put more juice behind the effort than what we've been doing.
And maybe you
on our
can
own
get
expense.
something for communications too, to really say,
Right.
we need some budget to reach the public. a
I'll-
little
I'll-
bit, and
I'll
get
put
some
something on paper.
communication support.
That we can react to.
Do other boards and commissions have budgets like this, or model?
They don't have bill collectors.
Yeah, there's, so there's, God,
He didn't know it was
there's
available.
hundreds of boards and commissions. A small number of them actually get paid, okay? So the members of the commission actually get a salary, okay? And the special state employees under the state ethics law, et cetera, et cetera. The vast majority of them are unpaid, okay? But they do have committed administrative support, and of course, they're special. So we would fall into that second group. I don't think we're looking to get paid, right?
So then we're really not asking for any special dispensation that other boards and commissions.
We can get some help.
I like it.
Talking all the time.
And so we would want to have administrative support. And
Keep in mind
eliminate-
that makes us vulnerable to, like, right now, we're just a bunch of, interested volunteers, we're
Yeah.
doing this out of the goodness of our heart. Automatically, we get one tax dollar. Now we become, you guys are
So there'll
supporting
be-
our public tax dollars,
Yeah.
what are you doing with our tax?
There'll be public
money?
records requests from us, and
Exactly.
which will have the money to answer.
Right.
Records requests, but right now we don't.
Yeah.
We're subject to the records, but we don't have money to respond.
So all this presupposes that.
Now, we have a few
continue
members
on
of the
December
public here.
31st.
Actually, why don't we ask you, do you think, what's your sense of the public appetite for throwing some tax dollars to make this process work better?
I
And
don't,
to reach more members of the public?
yeah, I can only speak for myself, and I'd be very happy to see, we're not talking about a lot of money in the scope of tens of billions of dollars in the state budget, and this is such an important issue that I can't imagine anybody squawking about that too much. What I would say is that, with respect to the schedule here, the state, as you know, is deliberating over the We the People Act, the legislature, and their deadline for this session is July 31st, 2020. That's when the two-year session ends. And I know we've been talking up the commission in our lobbying activities, saying, look for a report on the 31st. Now, I was about to put my hand up earlier in this meeting and suggest an extension, but, that July 31st deadline is something to keep in mind as far as giving the state legislature, they're looking to this commission for guidance on that bill. You know, whether or not to vote on it, what to think, would vote for it, vote against it, so I just wanna throw that date out there in the mix, you know. But as far as the money's concerned, I can't see any great, I mean, I'm speaking for myself again, I can't imagine there's gonna be a huge outcry if you ask for expenses, administrative expenses, I just don't see that.
I personally just think from the optics point of view, that the charge said that there was no budget,
Right.
and I don't think we should have a budget assigned to us. But perhaps there's a way to give some money to the state commission, and then they provide resources to us, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's different than our commission having money.
Right.
They have money, and we're allowed to tap that to do certain things on our behalf. Because otherwise, we're gonna go up against what the charge was, and we don't wanna have
I
that.
think the
That's a
public
good point.
probably assumed we'd have some resources, right?
Yeah.
You know,
I would think so.
A cab ride.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or meeting space, you know.
I can't
Yeah.
imagine more than 2 or 3% of the public read the whole, in the Red Book.
Now, an alternative, or perhaps in addition to, is we could go out and look for some nonprofit or ironically, some corporate funding to
That would
support,
be
you
ironic.
know, what, I mean, there
Dangerous,
might be
actually.
private money out there willing to support what we're doing here too, and we could try to.
Yeah, to me, it's
into that.
not so much about the money, it's about the administrative infrastructure
Yeah.
that already exists. That would be so productive just to gain their support. I mean, something as simple as how many cycles do we spend to find a meeting room?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the state is filled,
Yeah.
the State House is filled with meeting rooms, it's got security, it's got everything that we want, okay? So every week, every month, we recreate the wheel. We did several of these.
I will say, at the State House, they like to close things down at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
You know, so if we wanted to stay beyond 6 p.m., then, you know, it's like,
So I have ways of wording this to finesse the optics, which I.
That's
Make
to
it
engage
accessible.
the community.
Yeah, I thought we wanted to go to different places to make it accessible for people and engage.
Well, we're gonna do that too, the workshops that we voted on we can't do the formal
Like the
meetings, it's
meeting,
so hard to
okay.
get
Okay.
so hard to get a quorum
Got it.
we've found,
Got it.
so I think the idea was, well, let's get as many out on the road as
Like
we
in
can.
a smaller group.
In smaller groups and notice that public workshops.
Got it.
Comment, is there any
So we're
impetus
trying
to
to